Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. Today we are going to do a video by Kings and Generals. This is Darius the First and the greatest lie in history. There is a long backstory that Darius purposefully got out there about how and why he obtained power and why he deserved to obtain power of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. The Achaemenid Persian Empire had just had this explosion onto the scene under Cyrus the Great, and they had, after the fall of Assyria, kind of taken their place as the major regional power. And when Darius comes to the throne, he really doesn't have a strong claim for the throne. There are lots of other people that have more of a claim, particularly the brother of Cambyses, who, when Cambyses dies, it goes to, Dan Carlin has this thing, he says, Cambyses is the heir, and then the brother is the spare. Well, when Cambyses dies under mysterious circumstances, it should go to the brother, but it doesn't. It goes to Darius. So we're going to get into this. It's really one of my favorite conspiracy stories of history. It's really an incredible story. Let's get into it.
Assassination, conspiracy, and cover-ups. What more could we want in a story about imperial succession? The First Persian Empire was one of the greatest that ever existed. An expertly organized economy, a relatively tolerant and lenient provincial system, along with other groundbreaking advances in human civilization, was combined with some of the most scandalous and bloody court politics in the history of the world. Much of ancient Persia's prominence and prosperity was made possible by one man, perhaps the most competent ruler that Persia ever produced, Darius I the Great. Welcome to our video on Darius the Great and the story of how he rose to become the King of Kings. The Neo-Assyrian Empire had dominated the ancient Near East for 300 years, but its final destruction in 612 BC.
We've talked about this before. The Assyrian Empire is one of my favorite ancient historical empires. They are the major regional power before the Achaemenid Persian Empire. They're very different than the Persians. They are much more harsh. They're much more uniform in their military and fighting style. And the fall of Assyria is actually in the Bible, and it's written by what at least some historians believe is a contemporary of the fall. And it's really, really an incredible read because Assyria was so harsh to all of the powers around it. When you read about the fall of Assyria in the Bible, it's so harsh, and you can just feel the hatred of the Assyrians bleeding through the page.
Prompted the emergence of a multipolar geopolitical situation in the region. Four major powers jostled for the remnants of Assyrian glory: Babylon, Egypt, Lydia, and the Median Empire. But they would all soon be eclipsed by another figure from the east of the Zagros Mountains. The grandson of Astyages, king of Media, whose name was Cyrus, raised the province of Anshan in revolt against his overlord. 3 years later, in 550 BC, Cyrus managed to decisively defeat Astyages and brought the Medes into his rising Persian Empire. Marching his conquering army west, Cyrus, who was soon to be called Cyrus the Great, then defeated the Lydian king Croesus after capturing Sardis in 547. Finally, the Mesopotamian power of Babylon was crushed, and the city itself was captured in 539. Due to his peaceful and humane conduct during the city's seizure, Cyrus has been revered ever since by Iranians as the inventor of human rights. After spending the following period administering his new empire, this King of the Universe, as he was now known, passed away around 530 BC. How this monumental figure in world history died is variable in the sources. Herodotus states that the king was killed in battle with the ancient Scythian queen Tomarus, while Xenophon believed he died in his sleep. The following is what was done by me after I became king. A son of Cyrus named Cambyses, one of our dynasty, was king before me. That Cambyses had a brother, Bardia by name, of the same mother and the same father as Cambyses.
And if he gives a lot of sources, you're going to hear Bardia referred to as a handful of different names. That's, he's literally got like 4 different names, and depending on the source at the time, they'll specifically use one name or another.
Afterwards, Cambyses slew this Bardia. When Cambyses slew Bardia, it was not known unto the people that Bardia was slain.
So think about that. That sets up where we're going now. Cambyses is the heir, right? Bardia is the spare here. If Cambyses is going to have a threat, it's going to be from Bardia, his brother, right? That's the only other person that really has a strong claim to the throne. Well, it was tried to be set up where Bardia would have kind of a portion of the empire, but he would ultimately be under Cambyses, and that was the way that things would kind of be smoothed over. However, what Darius says in his writings are that Cambyses pretty much immediately turns around and kills Bardia, but he doesn't tell anybody that he's killed Bardia. And so now you have everybody, literally everybody in the empire who believes that Bardia, the spare to the throne, the brother of Cambyses, is still alive. And Darius is saying, nope, he's already dead. So you can kind of see the direction this is leading into.
Before his death, Cyrus had taken measures to mitigate the traditional dangers of succession in monarchy. In order to secure his dynasty, the first King of Kings fathered 3 daughters and, more crucially, 2 sons. His elder son, Cambyses, was appointed the crown prince to inherit the newly won empire after Cyrus's death. The younger son, Bardia, was appointed governor of Bactria, the largest and most important of the eastern satrapies. Moreover, he was granted additional privileges compared to a regular, non-royal satrap, being exempt from the payment of taxation or tribute to the central authority. These measures were clearly taken with the intention of neutralizing any insurrectionist ambition from Bardia, but they could equally have intensified such an urge. Cyrus's plans for the world of the future were clear to all. Cambyses would sit on the throne, while Bardia would be his loyal lieutenant in the eastern satrapies. To hammer the point home even further, Cambyses was married to 2 of his own sisters. After all, as historian Tom Holland states in his book Persian Fire, who is worthier of Cyrus's daughters than Cyrus's son?
There is a woman who is written about by Herodotus who is linked to the first 4 or 5 kings of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. So it's the daughter of Cyrus the Great, right? So one of the ones that is going to marry Cambyses. So she's the daughter of Cyrus. She marries Cambyses. She then marries the next king. We'll get to him in just a little bit. Then she marries Darius and fathers Xerxes. And so that's the 5. She's written about pretty glowingly by Herodotus.
Nevertheless, after the great king's corpse was interred in a sarcophagus of gold at Pasargadae, Bardia set to establishing himself in the east, while the incumbent king Cambyses marched on the 4th and final great regional power, Egypt. Using an attempted deception by the pharaoh Amasis II as casus belli, he had attempted to send another girl to him in place of his daughter, who Cambyses wished to be his mistress. The Persian king advanced into Egypt via a combined land and sea attack. This was a stunning success, and the Persians decisively defeated Amasis' son, Samanitus, at Pelusium in 525. After subjugating the Egyptians, Cambyses marched south into Nubia. While attempting to subdue the African kingdoms there, his army was gradually destroyed by a lack of provisions and the hostile desert conditions. Weakened as it was, this lost army of Cambyses was buried in the desert by sandstorms, where it supposedly remains to this day.
Yeah, there's still archaeologists that will go out and look for the lost army of Cambyses.
This failure strained the Persian king's mind to breaking point, and he began to descend into paranoia and madness. Matters became even worse when Cambyses entered Memphis to the jubilous celebrations of local people and their rulers, who were performing a religious festival in honor of the god Apis. Seeing the revelry, the half-mad Persian king was furious, believing the celebrations were actually prompted by his army's misfortunes in the southern desert. With this in mind, Cambyses ordered the sacred Apis bull brought to him and then stabbed it in the thigh, killing the creature which was revered as a representation of Apis in the Egyptian religion. To top his actions off, he also executed the leaders of Memphis who had, or so he thought, instigated such joy at his expense.
So they're going the direction of the Darius story, which I'm totally cool with. Like I said, it is such a great story. However, there is a lot of evidence today that this is not true. That the Apis bull didn't die in that way, that he wasn't stabbed, and so now it's believed more that Darius is spinning a web, and maybe that's what they're getting at with the greatest lie in history. But they're basically just going off of Darius' story, so don't take this all in as factual. Take this in as Darius's, like the way that Darius wants to be perceived, not only by the current world, but the future world. This is Darius's PR, for himself.
There was a certain man, a magus, Gaumata by name, who raised a rebellion in Paishialvada in a mountain called Arikadris. On the 14th day of the month Vyaxana did he rebel. He lied to the people, saying, "I am Bardia, the son of Cyrus, the brother of Cambyses." Descending ever further into paranoia and violence, Cambyses now ordered that his brother Bardia be executed. Why? The king had a dream in which he saw Bardia sitting on the throne, and so he feared an attempt at usurpation. After sending representatives to do the deed in secret, the younger of Cyrus's sons was killed, either on a hunting trip or by drowning in the Red Sea. An almost comical series of typically insane actions followed this assassination. The king wished to marry his sister against Persian tradition, but then personally killed her for sympathizing with the dead Bardia. Then, after this mad king subsequently had some of the most prominent Persian officials buried alive, Croesus, the former king of Lydia and now an advisor to the great kings, chided him for it. Getting angry at this backchat, Cambyses then tried to kill Croesus with a bow and arrow, but Croesus managed to escape. After sending assassins to do the job for him, who actually ended up protecting the august Croesus, Cambyses changed his mind and ordered that his advisor be spared. He was happy that the act had not been carried out. Nevertheless, he executed those men who had delayed.
Yeah, this entire story paints Cambyses as not only a tyrant, but literally one of the most mentally unstable people ever. I mean, think about what we've gone through just so far. He goes to Memphis after losing an army because he doesn't take enough food, he doesn't take enough water, he goes out into the desert and loses an entire army, right? He gets to Memphis, they are having the festival for the Apis bull. He thinks that they're celebrating his misfortune of, not taking provisions and losing the army. He starts freaking out about it and stabs the Apis bull, kills leaders at Memphis, tries to kill his brother, does kill his brother. Then he, kills his sister after wanting to marry her, wants to kill Croesus. Darius paints him as just the most incredibly unstable person ever. And there are actually historians that the ones that do buy into the mentally unstable Cambyses, they think that the usurpation may have been based solely on that the aristocracy of the Persian Empire basically came to the conclusion that they could not have this psychopath leading the new nation. And they decide that they are going to take him out, basically.
It is at this point, as the great Persian king descended further into madness in Egypt, that two Magi brothers rebelled against the throne in Persia proper, one of whom was said to look like the dead Bardia. The insurrection of this look-alike magus, known as Gaumata, began on March 11th, 522, and Babylonian tablets.
Magus has the connotation of magic. So just for where they're going to go with this, I'm sure. Keep that in mind. Magus has the links to what we would consider modern day magic.
Began to be dated to the reign of the false king. Heralds were sent from the new pretender king across the empire, proclaiming a new reign and informing the provinces that tribute and levies would not be extracted for 3 years under Bardia. The people, who did not know of the real Bardia's death at the hands of the insane Cambyses, began to pledge their loyalty to the man whom they believed was Cyrus's surviving son. One of Gaumata's emissaries made his way to Egypt, appearing before the army commanded by Cambyses. This man boldly told the soldiers that they must not obey Cambyses anymore, but Bardia instead. The army...
Think about how incredibly ballsy that is. He sends an emissary to the army that Cambyses is leading, right? He is with them on the march. The emissary shows up and says, don't follow this king that you're literally marching with right now. Instead, follow the king that is essentially has just usurped the throne back in Persia. Like, what a crazy, gutsy thing to do.
He did not heed his command, but the king learned from this herald that it was not Bardia himself who gave the order, but instead a man named Patizaithes, the second magus, and one who had been left in charge of the royal household while Cambyses was in Egypt. Realizing he now had a revolt to quell, the king hastily jumped on his horse to lead the army home. However, as Cambyses mounted his steed, the scabbard slipped from a sword on his lap, and the sharp blade consequently wounded him. In a karmic twist, he was wounded in the same place that he had stabbed the Apis bull, in the thigh. The wound...
Karma, right? That's one of the best parts about ancient history, is there's always this, karmic balance.
Quickly became infected and rotten, and Cambyses realized that he was going to die. Only now did the Mad King realize that his dream of Bardia's seizure of the throne had been true, but only of the imposter magus Gaumata instead. Realizing that he had killed his brother for no reason, the king wept and urged his high-born Persian attendants to take back the empire in an emotional scene, during which he seemed to have regained some sanity. After this, he died, having reigned for 8 years. During these final hours, one man who had notably been at the king's side was his lance-bearer, Darius. For 8 months after Cambyses' untimely death, Gaumata ruled as a pretender king, and it seemed as though he would get away with it. On the 8th month, however, the magus' deceptions were discovered. A Persian aristocrat known as Otanes was of high standing and extremely wealthy, a member of the empire's ruling class. His daughter Phidane had married Cambyses and was now wed to Gaumata, along with the majority of Cambyses' former wives. Suspecting that this King Bardia was not who he said, Otanes asked his daughter to check the ears of her husband when she occupied the royal bed again. This was because he knew that Cambyses had removed the ears of Gaumata years before, and this would still be the case even if he looked like Bardia in other ways. When Otanes received confirmation that the man's ears had indeed been cut, he decided to act. He could not do so alone, and so he approached two other high-born Persians whom he felt comfortable trusting. These were Aspathanes and Gobryas. Realizing they would need additional help, the three conspirators each recruited their most trusted acquaintance into the fellowship. Otanes brought in Taphrines, Gobryas called upon Megabyzus, and Aspathanes trusted in Hydanes. Finally, a seventh man entered the conspiracy, seemingly out of the blue, the aforementioned Darius.
See, and this is where the historians that think that this was essentially a move by the aristocracy to reclaim the throne. This is kind of where they're pulling that from, right? Cambyses is crazy. The story of him cutting his leg is, kind of hard to believe. You have this quote-unquote fake Bardia sitting on the throne, and the aristocracy is just going to wipe the slate clean, right? They're going to get rid of everything, and they're going to rebalance the empire.
He was trusted due to his lofty status as Cambyses II's lance-bearer, and the fact that his father, Hystaspes, was a well-regarded satrap of Persia. The conspiracy of the Seven was now in motion. There were none who dared to act against Gaumata the Magus until I came. Then I prayed to Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda brought me help. On the 10th day of the month Baghiadis, I, with a few men, slew that Gaumata the Magus, and the chief men who were his followers. During the first meeting of the Seven, a debate broke out between Otanes and Darius regarding what path to take in the execution of their plan to remove the Magi from power. Otanes argued for restraint and to wait until more information emerged, and until the group had more allies. In contrast, Darius urged immediate action, arguing that only evil would come of delay, and that for monetary gain, somebody would probably betray them to the Magus king if too many learned of their plan. Acquiescing to Darius's point of view, Otanes asked him how the group would gain entry into the fortress so that they could assail the two Magi. Darius argued that due to the Seven's lofty status as the very highest aristocrats and
Yeah, think about it. If you have the position that they have, who's going to stop you? Who's going to think you're coming to do harm to the king? Right? This is the aristocracy. This is the head of the empire. Why would they be anything to fear? And so that's kind of what they go with. It's just this, we'll use our names and our status in the empire to get in there, and then once we're in there, we'll go to work. And I think they end up, the first people they run into that actually catch on to what they're there to do is a group of eunuchs, if I remember correctly. If you have not read this story before from Darius himself, you absolutely need to read it. The quotes that he's been giving are from Darius's account, and it is just such an incredible story.
And leaders of the Persian Empire, the guards would not dare to refuse them entry, partly through reverence and partly through fear. Moreover, Darius would inform them of a letter he had been instructed to give from his illustrious father to the king. This plan persuaded the conspirators that they would succeed, and they all came over to Darius's point of view. With their confidence raised, the Seven set off for the fortress of Sikyvaltish, from which the Magus ruled. When the group approached the fortress gate, Darius's plan came into effect immediately. The gate guards, out of respect for the chief men of Persia and lacking knowledge as to their purpose, allowed them entry. Stage 1 of the plan was complete without a hitch. Upon entering the courtyard, the conspirators were approached by a gathering of royal eunuchs, who asked the oligarchs why they had come and chided the gate guards for allowing them in. It was at that moment that the 7 aristocrats drew their daggers and attacked the eunuchs, quickly stabbing those men who barred their path and progressing into the apartments where the Magi pretenders Gaumata and Patizaithes were sat talking. Inside, the 2 men had heard the commotion with the eunuchs and armed themselves, Gaumata with a bow and Patizaithes with his spear. During the ensuing fight, Gaumata was immediately on the back foot due to only having a bow in close combat. However, his companion struck Aspithanes in the thigh and stabbed Intaphrines in the eye, resisting fiercely. Nevertheless, Gaumata began to flee from the fight and went to close the door on his pursuers, but Darius and Gobryas barreled after him into the darkened chamber. Gobryas tackled the false bardier to the ground, and the 2 men began grappling together in the darkness of the room.
Yeah, so they're in this completely dark room. It's 2-on-1, but nobody can see anything. And so you have Darius and you have his friend there who has basically, they've chased Gaumata down into this room. Darius's friend tackles this fake king, this imposter. And Darius, who has a weapon on him, says like, I don't want to stab because I don't know if I'm going to stab you or the other guy. And Darius's friend is like, what are you talking about? Stab us both. Like, don't hesitate because you can't see. Run both of us through.
Darius stood idle with blade in hand, to which Gobryas asked why he did not strike. Darius replied, for fear of stabbing you. His companion told Darius to strike anyway, and so he did. The false king was killed, while Gobryas was uninjured. The conspiracy of the 7 had been a stunning success. I restored that which had been taken away, as it was in the days of old. This I did by the grace of Ahura Mazda. I laboured until I had established our dynasty in its place, as in the days of old. I laboured by the grace of Ahura Mazda, so that Gaumata the Magus did not dispossess our house.
And this is a switch in Persian kind of religious leadership with Ahura Mazda. But it's something that's interesting to me, but just so everybody knows, that's kind of a switch here for a lead god.
When the Persians heard what had been done inside the fortress at Sikyavautysh and how the Magi had tricked them, they followed Darius's example and slew all the Magi they could find. 5 days after the act had been done, a council was held between the conspirators to discuss the future of the state. Otanes argued for a democracy, Megabyzus for oligarchy, and Darius for the continuation of monarchy. When all the arguments were given, 4 of the 7 were persuaded by Darius's point of view, and in the subsequent contest for who would become the great king, Darius gained victory by a trick of his own. He was crowned Darius I, King of Kings, and all was well in the world once again. Or so Darius would have us all believe. Since the very beginning of this tale, only the words of Darius himself have been heard, his version of events. For almost 2 millennia, this story was accepted without question, but modern times have given us new sources and new methods. Using these, it is possible to tell that Darius, that Persian who supposedly hated lies above all else, might just have perpetuated one of the greatest deceptions in all history. Consider for a moment the possibility that Cambyses was not insane, and that he did not kill the Apis bull, as newly released records show he did not.
Well, okay, so Darius obviously makes it look like Cambyses is totally batshit crazy. But not only that, for this entire story, even if you give all of all of that craziness to Cambyses, imagine if he didn't kill Bardia. If he doesn't kill Bardia before all this stuff pops off, then who is sitting on the throne when Cambyses dies? Like, yes, it would have been a usurpation initially, but once Cambyses dies, he is the legitimate heir to the throne. And so, not only the craziness of Cambyses, but the timing of everything and whether or not Bardia was actually killed by Cambyses, which the Apis bull and the killing of Bardia are the two kind of big things that portray Cambyses' supposed insanity. Imagine if they aren't true, what this means. Like, it potentially means that Darius and a group of conspirators may have killed Cambyses and then gone back to Persia and killed Bardia and taken the throne. It really is. It's kind of crazy how much Darius pushes this story out and is like, this is the truth, this is what happened, this is why I'm king, and this is why I deserve it.
In addition, consider that Cambyses did not kill his brother, and it too was a lie.
Yep.
If Bardia had not perished at the hands of his elder brother, just how did he die? Finally, consider the fate of Gaumata the Magus, and entertain the idea that maybe, instead of being a fake Bardia, that he was in fact the real Bardia. It seems increasingly likely that it was Bardia, the rightful heir to the throne, that the conspirators killed that day in Sikyavaltish. New videos on Iranian history are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button.
Okay, so that was the incredible story and conspiracy of Darius and his rise to power. The Achaemenid Persian Empire is so interesting to me, from Cyrus and all the way down to it trails off a little bit once you get past Xerxes, but even then, once you get past Xerxes, you're getting into a different time period where there's about to be another major player burst onto the scene with regards to the Persians, and that's Alexander the Great. So I love the time period. I love the Achaemenid Persian Empire. And of course, this story being so, fantastical and out there, it's really one of my favorite historical reads. So this was a really well done, great video. I've read a bunch of different historians and kind of looked at what they think happened here, and honestly, it's all across the board. You have some historians that think that this is decently close to the truth, this story of Darius's. You have others that think that Darius and a group of conspirators from the aristocracy killed Cambyses, killed Bardia, and took the throne for themselves. The thing that they have kind of backing that viewpoint is that the seven are very, very, very well taken care of going forward, and so are their descendants. And I say seven, really it's the six. The seventh is Darius, and he gets the throne, so I guess they're well taken care of too. But Darius makes sure, and he even puts it in writing, that the quote is something along the lines of, whoever shall be king hereafter, take well care of the offspring of these men, when referencing the seven. So, there's historians that think all sorts of different things happen, but I'm curious what you all think. Do you believe the story? Do you think he just killed everybody and took the throne? Somewhere in the middle? You guys let me know. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Help me keep building the channel over here. I'll put the Discord link in the description box down below, and I'll see you all next time.